Please excuse my messy craft room. I have just got back from 9 weeks in the UK, and unfortunately the desire to stitch is much stronger than the desire to clean at the moment. So I'm going to have a go with this one, and hopefully it'll be good. I've ironed just very lightly a crease in, so I've halved it lengthways and just pressed, and then I've halved it widthways as well and just pressed. That gives me a centre point from which to work. The other thing I've done is I've already cut out my applique pieces. Now, I did do, again, try and do what I say, not what I do. What I've done on these is that I cut them out. I traced them out of the pattern. The pattern's in the book. I traced them out onto freezer paper to cut out the shapes, thinking that she doesn't use, Lisa doesn't use fusible web on hers, but she actually does. So just in case you ever do this, don't think you've got to start again and you've got to waste your shapes. All I've done is gone and got my trusty scrap box of Bonder web, and what I've found is I found this mesh that I've got that's got a gluey shiny side and then the paper on the other side. And what this enables you to do, you can get this from any craft store. I think it's generally called Bonder web or something, but you need the one with the paper on the background because you want to be able to press it twice. You want to be able to press it the first time onto your shape and cut it out, and then the second time you then peel off the paper off the back. That leaves the glue on the side of your felt, and then you pop that onto your project, oops, out of camera view that way, and iron it on, and then that's what then adheres it to your project. Now, as I say, I've forgotten this step, so what I'm going to do is I've just got a pair of paper scissors, and what I'm going to do is use these scraps, and I'm going to use them just to glue it down really. So I'm going to just pop this, make sure it doesn't go over the edge. That does a little bit, so I'm just take a little corner off there, that's all. So what this will do is it'll just anchor it all for me. So all I do is just pop that on the side like this, and I'm going to do this for each of my shapes, just using some of the pieces I've got. Let's use that for the little piece and that for the medium piece. Just pop it on the back of my pieces like this, making sure that they're not too long. And then I'm just going to take it over to the ironing board and iron it. Ooh, this way. Take it over to the ironing board, just iron that on now, and it won't go right to the edges, but this is felt anyway. It's not felted wool because I couldn't get any, and so the edges don't fray on felt anyway, but it will just hold everything in place once I've got it sorted. So I'm just going to do that on each of these items for all of the things. I've got the two birds here, two little lovebirds. They need their beaks, they tuck behind the flowers. And we have to remember as well not to have them both the same way, because we don't want them to be falling out. We want them to be one facing each other as in the picture. So just to remind us of the picture, there's the lovebirds there facing each other. So we need one this way and we need the other one facing that way. So I need to remember that when I'm putting my fusible on the back side of these, because they need to be one facing one way. If I did them both that way and fused it on, I wouldn't be able to use those, because when you turn it over to stick it down, both of them, they'd both have their backs to each other. So just keep your eye on that, but that's just a minor point. You should be able to sort that through. So I'll come back to you when I've just popped some fusible on the back of these and ironed it on in the first place. So here we are, we've got all of our pieces now with their little scraps of bond web on the back of those, fusible interfacing. So what I'm going to do now is I want to layer up the flowers, because the flowers are layered on the top of each other in threes like this before being stitched. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix these three layers together before I pop it on, so they then stay as a whole. So what I'm going to do to remove the fusible, you just fold it back on itself, and that should then give you a little bit. You should be able to tell that you're peeling off the paper and leaving the glue on the edge. I don't know if the camera will pick that up or not, but I can see here that there's a shiny mesh on the back of that piece. So the paper goes in the bin, and I'm just folding this glue back. It's a little bit fiddly sometimes, but just persevere. The paper gets quite crinkly, so you can then just ease an edge. And again, there we can see there's a there's the mesh on the, oh, you can just see that on the camera, look, you can see the mesh is left behind and the paper's been removed. So the paper comes off. Now, at this stage, don't remove the one on the bottom because we want to save that for when we're placing it. We're just going to layer these down, so just make sure you put your glue side down. Adjust it round so that you're happy with where each of your little petals are lying. That looks quite nice. And then what we can do is take that to the ironing board, iron it over as it is there, and that will then keep those three together for me, and we're using them then as one before we start to embroider around the outside. So let's do another one. Go on to the, oh no, not the big one first. Oh, nearly did it. So on to the second biggest. Let's just peel off the backing. There we go. Place that one onto there. Make sure we're happy with how that. And these are free form, so you know there isn't. You can be precise if you want to follow the pattern directly, but to be honest, I think that there's a little bit of freedom in this. And flowers are not all uniform, are they? In nature. So peel this one off. Just use your nail if you need to, or just go to a different corner. If you find one corner's being a little bit tricky, just go on to a different one, and you'll eventually get it. There we go. There's the last one. So I'll just pop these over to the ironing board and just fix those together, and then I'll come back to you. So now I've got all of these fused down. They're not right to the edges, obviously, because I've only used patches, but if I was to do it properly and follow the instructions, then this would have had the fusible right to the very edges, and that would have held everything down. But these are all now stuck down. Just leave it to cool on your ironing board, and that'll just manage that. So I've chosen these colours to embellish my cushion, as you can see in the original. If I just remind you, ooh, what the original looks like, can't see it very well. There, look. So it's all embellished with some embroidery flossers. So what I've got here is I've got some grey for my birds, which is going to pick up a little bit of a sheen from the DMC. I have got that colour, I think is for the forget-me-nots, which is this one here. So I'm just going to keep one just there so you can see. Slightly darker, but it'll just enhance it, I think, a little bit. This is for the outside of the flowers, this green. I'm going to use this for the outside of the flowers, the leaves. Ooh, this one is for the centre of the flowers. Now I might have used this one actually for the there's a little bit of embroidery embellishment just down here on the leaves. So that might be that one. So I'll play that one by ear. So I'll keep those out of the way because I've not stuck those down yet. But for now, this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to now have a look at doing the blanket stitch around the outside of the flowers with this lovely green. I'm then going to go around with the grey around the back sides of the edges of the birds. This is for the colonial knots for in the front. That's a new stitch I've got to learn, which we'll have a go at doing those. I'm used to French knots, but I think these colonial knots are a little bit bigger. And then again, I want to just go around the edge of the leaves with this green and then do a stem stitch down the middle. So let's have a go at doing that then, shall we? So I'm going to work on the birds first. I've got some embroidery and chenille needles here. These are John James ones that come in these little pebbles. And what I've done is I've just cut out from the label what they were, because otherwise I didn't know which ones were which. So I have just stuck those on the front, which is perhaps a tip just to keep an eye on which needles you've got. She does say to use a chenille needle, so I'm going to use one of these. When I say she, I mean Lisa Bongean. And also I'm using this DMC thread, which is stranded because I hadn't got any pearl cotton in the colours that I need, or the Valdini, so I'm using these embroidery threads. And a tip that I saw recently was that when you've got your 6 strands together that we can split, if you just tap the end with your finger, then the threads all do separate, so it is easier then to take the number that you need. I'm going to split this and use 3 threads for my outlining for my blanket stitch. So let's just make sure I've got 3. I think I've got 4 there, so let's just take that one over to the other side. And also another, I do tend to take them multiple, with this length of thread I've pretty much got from my fingers to my elbow for my piece of thread, and then I tend to grip it with my fingers and pull it through. Now it does sometimes, as you can see, get tangled up. It's not going to work for me today. So the other thing that you can do is, if you've not knotted it, just take one thread and just pull it through at a time. So that's one. Oh, it's all going to get in a knotted mess. Look, you see, I'm not an expert. I'm just a home sewist, just like you, just having a play, but trying to share my journey and document what we're doing. So let's just see if we can get this saved. Try taking out a different one instead, that might go through fine. So that's number 2. I'm just going to keep this separate for the moment, and then I'm going to lie them together again when I do them. That's number 3. And then this knot, in actual fact, that's in here should sort itself out. Yes, it has. There's another one. And let's just do these ones here. These have just got tangled up, so let me take that one off next. 2, 3. Oh, gosh, what a mess, Claire. Right, but it's been saved. We've not had to throw it away. That's the main thing. Okay, so now I'm just going to put the ends of these together, just match those up. 1, 2, 3. I think that's that one. That's that one. That's it. So let's just put those together. Give them a little twist just so they're just starting to reconnect. I think this is going to be thick enough for what I need, but if I do a one bird and I decide that, or one part of the stitching and I decide that I want anything else, then I can use 4 threads if I wanted to, or less if I do. It's purely down to personal choice, unless you're using the called for, and then I would just copy exactly what Lisa has suggested to you, Lisa Bongean of Primitive Gatherings. So there we go, we've got our two lengths unknotted, ready to go. So the way I thread mine is just put it over the needle, slide the needle out towards the thin end, and then that will just then push through. And I'm going to do what are called quilter's knot at the end. So again here we can just hold on to the end, hold the thread over the top of our needle, wrap it round 2 or 3 times, do 3 times, then hold those knot wraps onto the needle. Just pull your needle through to the end, and then you've got a really nice knot just on the bottom there for you. Okay, so now it's time to reacquaint myself with blanket stitch, because that's what needs to go around the edge of these birds. So I'm going to have a quick look at the instructions, how to start and how to stop, and then I will come back and we'll get going. So for my refresher on blanket stitching, I'm coming to Lisa Bongean's first book, Wool, Needle and Thread, and in here we've a beautiful picture on the front here of the embroidery and the felt embroidery, which eventually I'll hopefully get up to doing. But for here on page 44 we've got about the blanket stitch, and she shows very, very clearly step by step how to start this off. So let's have a go and see if we can work this through. So first of all we need to find our starting place, and I'm going to work, she works right to left, so let's start over here. I'm going to bring up my needle behind the petals, so I suppose that's useful that this hasn't been fully stitched down, but right on the edge of the work of the felt, and pull it through. She then says that you hold the thread out of the way with your finger, with your thumb, and you're going to take a bite of your wool and come up just on the edge, but not through anything else, so just right on the edge. So let's pull that through, and that has given us our first stitch. So we're going to again hold the thread out of the way. I'm going in about 1/8 of an inch, I think, and then just pulling this through. So this is quite a strong contrast to the light grey of the wool. Hold that out of the way. And the secret to this, I think, is going to be the uniformity of the stitches as we're pulling through. Well, that's not bad for saying I've not really done blanket stitch since school. quite happy with that. And the DMC is behaving nicely as well, which is it's a nice thread, and definitely a nice budget option if you've not got all of the options of lots of different threads available to you. So we're just going to go around this little curve. Hopefully I can accentuate that enough with the stitching so that it doesn't just look like a straight line. Yeah, that's coming nicely. Can you see it's dipped in and then it's coming back out again? So I've now just started to work on the little beaks, and what Lisa suggests you do for these is do a satin stitch. Now what I've found before is that sometimes the satin stitch edges can be a little bit uneven. So what I've found is that if I do some filler stitches in the opposite way to the way that I'm going to be filling in and doing my satin stitches, so in this case I'm at the moment going east to west or west to east, whichever way, rather than the north to south that I'm going to be doing on these beaks when we get through. And what that means is that it just kind of gives it a padding to go underneath the stitches. So literally I'm just going through and just putting a few little filler stitches in to the beak first. As you can see, hopefully, light's not brilliant, but move across slightly, that's it. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is come up on the very edge of the first stitch over here, but just try and tuck it under slightly, the stitches, and then go in slightly under the first stitch on this side here. And then it kind of sits on top of those stitches that you've just done first. Just want to be almost a thread away from where I went in. Down to the side. You want those stitches to lie as flat and as close as possible to each other. Let's go through there. We're going to work down towards the point at the end. So can you see that's kind of pulling those threads in. You're almost going a hair's breadth in from where you think it should be, because the thickness of the thread will take up some room on your little beak. You don't want him to end up with he or she to end up with a big. And if your stitches don't just lie flat enough for you, just run your needle across them, just spread them out slightly. Getting down to the very point here. So one more stitch just here, I think we just need 2 more stitches. So 1 stitch just there, and then 1 stitch just over the very edge. Very end. Again, with these beaks, I just marked them on first with my Frixium pen just to make sure that I was happy, and in this case I'm going straight over the top of them anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So there we go. I'll turn that around for you. We have 2 little beaks on our birds. So next off I think I'll do the leaves. So if you can tell, I'm working from the underneath up, so I'm working from the objects that are furthest away and then bringing it up, so that we've got this this ability to move up on top, because what we want to be able, if I did the flowers next, and I can't bury the ends of my start and stop stitches for my leaves, so that will just then work through on there. Okay, hope you're following along so far. I'm really enjoying this project, so I hope you are too. Okay, we're a couple of days later now, and I have moved on quite a bit with this piece actually. I finished sewing around the flowers, and I've done bullion knots in the middle here. I followed the instructions precisely in Lisa's book, Wool, Needle and Thread. Oh, not that one, sorry, that's the project. In this one, Wool, Needle and Thread, the guide, and that's worked perfectly, very clear and easy to understand. I've also attached the little forget-me-nots, and they're just loose on the petals, as you can see, and I just did a stitch, as Lisa has suggested, inside the petals, just at each indentation. And then I used my Frixion pen, as you can see here, to mark where I wanted each of these fronds of leaves to go. And I just thought I'd come back to you and show you the process just for finishing off these. So sorry if I've jumped ahead a bit further, but I had problems with my telephone, which is what I used to record my videos. I hadn't got enough storage, so I had to do some work on getting some more storage there. So I've just done my quilter's knot again by holding my thread over my needle, wrapping it round and then pulling it through, and we're ready to go. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to come up just behind one of these petals. As you can see, the petals are loose. That gives a nice little bit of 3D detail for this piece. And I'm doing a stem stitch for this, so I'll put the first stitch in like that and pull it through. Then the second stitch goes halfway along that one to one side of the threads, and then moves on again one more stitch. And then again we now go in where the first stitch came out, so we're always kind of leapfrogging these stitches, and then that goes in further on and pulls through. And this just gives a really nice, neat, fairly thick little line. I'm using 2 strands of floss for this one. Some of them I've used 3. On the flowers I think I used 3 because I wanted that detail to stand out quite deeply. On the little centre of the forget-me-nots, Lisa Bongean says to do 3 French knots, or colonial knots, so I've done those. Again, following the instructions in the book, and I've really enjoyed this project. It's come together fairly quickly, which is always good, and I think it looks quite effective as well. So I'm going to make this into a cushion, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish off this sew along. Really, it's not really a tutorial, is it? But this little sew along for the wool applique, and then I'm going to do the cushion on a different video, because I think that could well stand alone, and then it doesn't make the videos too long either. Don't want to get bored while you're watching. So if you want to do that in the next couple of days or so, I'll do the back first, which I'm going to do in this same linen fabric, and I'm going to do a lapped zip on the back of that. I've got a tutorial that I'm going to link in the description, not this, on the new video, and that has worked fabulously well for me. Very easy to follow and understand. So I'll refer back to that one and I'll link it for you when I get to there. So just at the end, I'm just going to finish that stitch off in the same place as this one, the one previous, and then I'm just going to come 1 thread back from the edge. That's what I find works for me. If you try and go in at the very edge, at the very end of your last stitch, quite often you undo that stitch. So I'm just going to make a loop now, because these little leaves are all lazy daisy stitches. So you take a little bite of your fabric like that with the loop of the thread underneath your stitch, and as you pull you get a little chain stitch, and then to anchor that all you do is just go back into your work just on the other side of the loop, and that then holds that in place. And then the way that Lisa has done these in the picture is she's come very, very close to the stem, and then she does another little stitch, and she alternates which side you do these on, and it's really effective. So again, I've changed the colours on this. Originally the camellias were all in white. That would have matched my decor, but I didn't actually find any felt in the shop that I went to. I only had a choice of 1 shop to go to. and they didn't have the colours, so I've had to improvise. So I've used these different colours, but I think sometimes that can add a different dimension to a project and make it more personal to you. Also, if we don't want everything all the same, do we, all the time? Sometimes we just want to copy completely, and I absolutely get that, and I'm the same. But on this one, circumstances dictated a bit of a change, and so that's what I did. So I'm just coming down this stem here, just trying to make them fairly even, not too far apart, doing my loops, thread underneath the needle so that when it pulls it anchors it back down, and then you just put one little stitch at the very end, and that just holds that down for you. You can use these going around in circles as well, these lazy daisy stitches, just for doing petals on flowers. They're very effective like that as well. So I've tried to see what I've done here. I've tried to avoid doing that, having a gap between the stem, because I think they look better when they're joined on. So just let's just undo that one. So just take thread out of your needle. Use the back of your needle just to unpick your stitch. Always good to know how to correct things. Put the thread over the needle and towards the thin end, and then we can then just thread our needle nice and easily, as she says. Never easy when you're on camera. Do it first time every time when you're off camera. And then let's just take it again now. So I need to go a bit closer into my stem. So let's come round. There we go. That's better. Happy with that. I'll do one more just here. I might do two more this side. Let's just see how these look. That's that one there. And then let's do one more that just disappears a little bit behind. Often pull that one a little bit tight, look. Just want a little bit of give in them, just to give a bit of the detail. Oh, and I've threaded my needle now. Always on camera. At least the needle's got a big eye, so it's easy to see. Right, I'm on this one, aren't I? Just here. I think there's one more after this one, I think. Again, if you do one more and then you decide you don't like it, you can soon unpick it. Just experiment a little bit. It's your project at the end of the day. There's no science involved. You don't need to go onto the pattern and start counting how many and how far away they are. Just freeform it, because you'll still get the feel of how the designer intended it. Okay, so that's that last one. So I'm just going to turn over. Let's see the messy back of my work. But I'm going to put a little cover over this, I think. A little lining, if you like. I'm just going to take a piece of white cotton that I've got in my stash, just that I keep from old sheets and what have you. And then that will just cut it to exactly the same size as this rectangle here. Stitch it close to the edge so it'll be hidden in the side seam, and then if that's ever taken off, then you won't see it. So, upside down. So here we go. That's the completed project. I hope you like it as much as I do. I'm really pleased with that. And then this concludes for the wool applique, the video for the wool applique. And then what we'll do next is I will do a little video of how to make this into a cushion.